All right, folks, this is Ask the Roots. I'm going to talk to you guys about Richard Marx's second album, Repeat Offender. This was suggested to me by the big brain on music. You can see his name on the screen. So Richard Marx is a adult contemporary kind of pop rock R&B almost type artist, and he was big in the mid late 80s and into the 90s and so on. And his first seven singles that he dropped to radio all hit like the top five of the Billboard 100. So obviously back then he was a pretty large star. I think obviously, I mean, it's surprising that this album, which is seen as his top selling album, didn't get more than 4 times platinum. But that's the thing about it. I mean, this album had 6 singles off of it, and 2 of which hit #1. A third got into the top 5, and then a couple extras hit like 12 and 13, which nowadays would be pretty high. So when you compare music that happens now, I mean, obviously any album that can get to the sixth single and have all of them virtually hit the top 20, that probably, I mean, that's like Adele territory. But music was kind of better back in the 70s, 80s, and kind of early 90s. That was just taken for granted. But so a couple hits that Richard Marx had to his name before this album was "Don't Mean Nothing," and then there was like another one, "Should Have Known Better," both of which came off of his self-titled album, and that one actually went 3 times platinum. But so I was kind of at a mixture for this album when I first listened to it, which I tried doing this review last month. I was under the impression I liked a good chunk of the album, but the singles, I felt like probably over half of them I probably was not going to listen to that much. Luckily, that improved somewhat, but I'll digest it so you know what I'm talking about. So the first song is "Satisfied," and that has a nice feel to it. It feels like it could be on a movie soundtrack. That hit #1, so it's a pretty heard song. I mean, it's kind of before my time, but I would think probably on the radio in the 90s you might have caught this song. And then "Right Here Waiting" was the second single. Now this is the most popular song on the album, "Right Here Waiting." On Spotify it shows like it has like 80 or 100 million hits or something like that. But this is one of those songs kind of like Mariah Carey's, one one some one sweet day or something like that. Something that Boys to Men would do. This is a real. It's supposed to be like a touching song, but that's probably like one of the definitive songs that people know Richard Marx for. But I did not really have the taste for it. I know obviously at a certain time it's supposed to be one of those hand waver songs, something like that. That just you feel good from listening to it. But I mean, you just have to pick like your mixture of what you think of that, because there's 2 other singles out of the 6 that are kind of similar to that song. I feel like "Angelia" is another one that's like a lighter version of "Right Here Waiting." I actually feel like this is a song I'm on the fence about, but then "Children of the Night" is kind of in the similar fashion to that also. So, I mean, it wasn't too bad just because, or it wasn't bad just because, out of 6 singles, half of them are kind of more happy-go-lucky, and then the other half are more thought-provoking and meaningful. But it just depends. I mean, from first listen to dive right into that stuff, that's kind of where I'm coming from. Had I known him longer, it'd be like, oh yeah, this is something. But that's just the thing. So I felt like some of this stuff would be good for like karaoke music. I mean, he really sounds 80s. When I've listened to things like the Grand Theft Auto Vice City soundtrack, or been to karaoke bars and heard some real 80s Madonna and Cyndi Lauper type music, I mean, he fits right in with some of these folks, and that's kind of like the main thing. So I feel like "Nothing You Can Do About It," "Satisfied," those are a couple of the songs that do feel pretty, sing-songy and just melodic. And I mean, a lot of them are melodic, but it just feels, I mean, those are the feel good that I would feel more in tune with. But then there's also another one, "Too Late to Say Goodbye." That was probably the song that was one of the ones I favored the most. So the first half of the album is mostly good. Uh, Out of the first 6 songs, I liked about 4 of those, and I'll list those. So "Nothing You Can Do About It," "Satisfied," "Angelio" is the almost song, "Too Late to Say Goodbye," and then "Hard on the Line." All of which are extremely good. But then, I mean, obviously, as an album, I think he was trying to establish himself as something to see as more as than just, you know, just a tacky artist or something like that. So I know it was probably necessary, but I don't know the time. I mean, that was just the way 80s, 90s albums were oriented. They did have to kind of do that stuff because, when you go to concerts, you're not just trying. I mean, you want like the feeling that goes along with it. So, but okay, so now I'll just tell you the 6 song or the 5 songs I recommend out of the 11, or yeah, the 11 that are on here. So ones I recommend to you are "Nothing You Can Do About It," "Satisfied," "Too Late to Say Goodbye," "Hard on the Line," and "If You Don't Want My Love." Now all of these have like a similar feel, but it really kind of comes off as almost like R&B, which is really what I was aiming for as I saw that. I mean, the thing, this music that gets you up and moving and just has you wanting to kind of tune in and that sort of stuff. It's not just headphone music. It's not just, you know, just kind of sheltered or isolated music. It actually feels as if, there's something that can go along with this sort of thing, which is kind of what I was aiming for when listening to it. But I mean, obviously, it does try to be the full package. So I would feel like, more experienced musicians who can appreciate slower and more, thoughtful songs would probably say that this album might score higher. I mean, it has a lot of massive hits on here. So if you're just paying attention to my review rather than the chart appeal that this album had, that might confuse you. But it did have 6 singles, and almost all 6 of them did chart pretty damn high. That is kind of thing. But I'm going to give this album a 6.5 out of 10, is because I did like 5. I mean, that's really less than half the album, but the fact that they were so massive and the fact that the singles were good, and it was kind of like a treat just listening to it, I felt like, yeah, it is above average. But obviously some folks would feel like, no, this is like above average, but to me that was what I got with it. So 6.5. The social score will get like a 9, just because of how much promotion this project did have. But once again, this album only went 4 times platinum, so that's just what you're getting at, is trying to say that. So yeah, so it depends upon who you angle yourself with as to how the impact of the CD goes. But that was my trek with that project. So subscribe for more fun.